Okay, hello. So let's just dive around right into it. So we were refactoring this family app I have using Impact to talk about state management and some of the challenges we're facing at CodeSandbox. And I did a couple of small changes since we last played around with this, because we had an error concerning Firebase, and the reason was just because I did get Firestore before I did initialize Firestore. So I thought I was like I should pass the options first, because I guess it used default options here or something. Another thing I did was on pages here. I'm now using the dashboard skeleton as like the default coming from the server, but I think we can actually express this in a different way, because we have this lazy thing, and I read the documentation, and it actually states that if you wrap this in suspense, then the fallback is shown when it's suspending. And I guess when you do this on the server, it will just work. I don't know. Let's try it. Let's start there. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit. Yeah, because this is what happens, right? It just, for some reason, it starts. I wonder where this is coming from. Yeah, I don't want this to be about where the hell is this coming from? Window React. Window is not defined. It's almost like, yeah, I think there's like some import that happens. Oh, we're using Swiper here. It's probably that. Oh, why are we using Swiper core in this? Oh, interesting. Let's put the dashboard skeleton into its own file. Wait a minute. Why are we doing weekdays? Where's that coming from? Okay, let's just try it. Dashboard skeleton. Let's put that in its own file. Dashboard skeleton tsx. Why are you complaining? And I'm just going to just copy everything. That's how I do it. I just put everything in there, and then I rather remove the stuff I don't need. Let's see. Yeah, because now we don't have Swiper core here. Oh, but we still have Swiper. Well, okay, let's see what happens. We're just going to try this once, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and I don't care. Let's see. Menu card. Where is menu card coming from? Oh, and that's in here. Ugh. Okay, let's move that into its own file. Was it just menu card? Oh, weekdays. Okay, I'm not going to do this. We're not going to spend time on this. I can rather play around with that later. So let's just, yeah, we can keep the dashboard skeleton there, and then we'll play around with this later. It's interesting though, because it's kind of what we are doing at CodeSandbox as well. We render out a skeleton from the server, and we do some data fetching, because it's just like faster to do the data fetching from the server, because it's closer to our API. As opposed to go and fetch the page and then do the data fetching from the local browser, because users can be anywhere. So yeah, it's something. I was just interested in the suspense thing. Is that a way to make sure that you don't actually render anything on the server, and then you lazy load the actual app when you hit the client, in a straightforward way, because this is kind of silly. Like, are we in the browser, do this or do this? Anyways, let's not talk about that. Let's just make sure that it's working. It is. Okay. So what we're doing here now is on this page, we are just loading the page container. So if we're looking at the page container here, I added our first consumption of a store in a hook. And again, I'm like very explicit about this. So like my naming of variables and stuff is extremely explicit, which is like arguably something you should always do. But it's amazing what we can get hung up on. So here we're using our session store, and we're just checking if we're authenticating. If that's the case, we return the same dashboard skeleton. If we're unauthenticated, we still return the dashboard skeleton, but we also return the sign-in model. Or if we're signed in, we're going to return the dashboard. If we take a look at our Firebase store now, it is doing a little bit of configuration here. I could have moved this into its own thing, but let's not spend that much time cleaning things up. And then let's clean up a little bit. And then I don't want the other stores to be concerned about Firebase. So for example, on auth state changed, I'm just exposing that, but I'm binding the auth object as the first argument, so that the other stores doesn't have to do that, like, because I consider that Firebase specific. But listening to auth changes, that's not Firebase specific. And the same for sign-in, like you need the auth here. It's just the way Firebase is structured. Like you have to pass in this instance of auth or Firestore all the time. And I don't think that makes sense when we're going to split up our logic into many different pieces. Then all these pieces needs to have access to the auth or the Firestore and kind of pass that in every time. We want to abstract that. So we put this behind the store, and then in the session store, we are moving between these session states, and then we're listening to any changes to authentication where we handle that. If we have a user, we go and grab the user or the user document, which call it user. Oh, it's already, yeah. Maybe user, because it's maybe a user. Because when we're authenticated, we also need to go and grab like a document from the Firestore, because it holds the ID of the family you're part of, and that might fail. And if it fails, we move into an unauthenticated state with an error. Yeah, cool. So we are ready to move on. What we could do here is in the sign-in model, we can check if we are unauthenticated with a reason, so that we actually show the error in this model. And I think that makes sense, but I'm not sure if we're going to play around with that either. Yeah, let's not do that. Let us not do that. Yeah, we don't care about that. It never fails, right? Cool. So what should we do next? I think last time we talked about what strategy we're going to use to do the refactor. And if we look into the dashboard, and let's see, what do we have here? Authenticated dash. Oh, here we have the dashboard. Okay, so here we also have a suspense boundary, but we're not going to put a suspense boundary around the whole dashboard now. And we don't need to call it authenticated dashboard. What we need to think about is what are we going to use the authenticated user for? I know it's currently being used to fetch data, because like all the data in Firebase is like behind the UID of the user. So I've been using that in the app to make calls for data, but now we're actually going to remove that. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to try, because I don't think, I don't think we actually need, let's try without having access to user data. If we actually wanted access to user data, we can just create a store for that. Maybe that's a good thing. Let's do that. So, because it brings up an interesting subject, because you have something called a session store. Now, a session store, you can be in any state, right? So if you want access to the user from a session store, you have to check, are we actually authenticated? Because it's only when you're authenticated you have access to the user store. But the whole app is running as an authenticated user. So you want easy access to that user. You don't want to use the session store and then check every time, is it authenticated? And then you have access to the user. And this is how, I guess this is the simplest example of how Impact's composition model comes into play. Because what we're going to do now, if we look at our, where's the page container, is that we're now going to render out the dashboard. But when we do that, we are going to expose a new set of stores. And this new set of stores, they will be in an authenticated state, right? Because we mount them when we're authenticated. So we can just give those stores the user. And whenever you consume these specific dashboard stores, they will like be in an authenticated state. Because if you change your authenticated state, we'll go straight back in here to unauthenticated. All these stores are like unmounted and disposed of, and the dashboard isn't shown. So let's do that. Let's just call it user store. And it's going to be super, super simple. Export function user store. It's going to give us user DTO. And this user store is just going to return. We're going to use a signal for this. Let's call it user data. And we're going to use a signal, even though I don't think anything will ever really change on that user. So we'll just put that in there. And then what we need is the family ID. So we'll turn, wow, did it understand that? That's impressive. Cool. AI. Okay, so now we have a user store, and this takes like a user. So let's now expose this. And the way we're going to expose this is actually we're going to create, let's see, components. Yeah, we can talk about this as well. So now I structure my app based on like technical responsibility. Is it a component? Is it a hook? Is it a page? Is it a store? But you can also structure it as like it's domain or by feature. So we could rather have like a dashboard folder, and in that dashboard folder you would have the stores for that dashboard, you would have components for that dashboard if there were any traditional hooks, and so on. So we could do that, but again I don't want to like spend a lot of time like just moving stuff around. So what we're going to do for now is just create our stores provider for the dashboard. So let's call it dashboard stores provider. And we're going to start with our, not the session store, but the user store. I wish, this is the thing I don't, I wish that, what's it called? The IntelliSense would understand this. Like I don't get any suggestions on this. I have to like, but if I do it here, then I do, I think, user store. Yeah, then I get it. But then I have to remove this again. So annoying. Okay, so the only thing that we're going to have here is the user store for now, but we're going to add more stores here, like for our grocery list, our to-dos and everything. And this is going to wrap our dashboard. And as you can see, we get a type error because we've said that our user store wants a user. And that user comes from our state, because now we are actually authenticated. So what we've conceptually done now is that we have mounted the dashboard page with a set of stores, or a single store for now, which is in the context of being authenticated. So there's no question when you're in the dashboard components if you're authenticated or not. Like literally no question. You're not asking the type system or anything about that. Okay, so that means if we go back here, we don't need this authenticated, because now you kind of see what happens. I had to have like a dashboard, then I needed an authenticated dashboard because I didn't know if I actually had the user there or not. So we can remove all of this stuff. And then the actual dashboard becomes the dashboard. And immediately let's just do an observe around this, because we're probably going to consume some signals there. One note on observe. There's a different syntax for this that I prefer using, but it requires a brand new JavaScript API called I can't remember the resource management, explicit resource management or something. It's not in the language yet, but it's on like stage 3. TypeScript already has it. But I need a bubble plugin, and that bubble plugin is so new that it needs the latest version of Bubble Core, and latest version of Bubble Core conflicts with even latest version of Next.js for some reason. At least I get an error about conflicting versions, and I don't want to spend time on that. So we're going to use this syntax for now. What I could do instead is use the new keyword using and then observe. And what's nice about that is it doesn't interfere with like your exports. For example, here, if I want a named function, I will have to say function again and then dashboard. So you duplicate dashboard, or I would have to like define dashboard and do export default with observe. So you don't really see by reading a component if it's observing or not. You have to scroll down to where you export it. Like what I mean is that using a higher order component like this dictates how you can write your component, while this new syntax does not dictate at all how you export and define your component. Cool, but what we're going to do here, we're only going to do dinners, groceries shopping. How does this work? Isn't this like render view? Oh yeah, dashboard content. So we're going to render dashboard content, and now I had this concept of view. Yeah, I don't use a router here. I just use like a client side or a manual implementation of navigation, and that's because this acts as an app. So we can keep that, but what we could do is move it into a store instead. So maybe we can start with that, because now where does this view come from? View stack. Yeah, this is interesting because it's based on a reducer, and you see like you have dispatches, and the way I get like the current view is that since I don't really have I only have state and the dispatcher, I don't really have a good way to get the current view. Like you wouldn't, in a reducer state, you wouldn't create a getter on a property of the state to, for example, get the current view. It's interesting. But with stores, we can do whatever we want. So let's create a view stack store. And now it seems like, why are you using stores for everything? But asking that question in impact is like asking, why are you using hooks for everything in React? And it's and the thing is it's a fundamental building block. It doesn't even it doesn't dictate anything about what you put in there. It's just a composition, you enable composition and consumption in any component. So that's kind of what was important to keep in mind. Close other tabs. I think, yeah, so this is just a hook now. Where's use? Where the hell did I put that thing? Use view stack? Where the hell is it? Ugh. Dashboard. Oh, it's in here. I'm just going to copy this, and then we're going to see. So if I truly wanted this to be a reducer, I could implement that state as a reducer in this store, and then any other store could consume that, or you could consume it in a component if you wanted to do that. But here we don't want to use, you really don't want to use reducers. This argument of reducers, you want to control how state changes, and a reducer encapsulates how some piece of state can change. You can't explicitly change the state of a reducer. You pass in an action, and the reducer itself decides what that action can do with the state. But it doesn't, it's the exact same concept. I'm overselling stores here, but it's just an example in this case. It's the same concept here. If you want to control how some internal state is being changed, it's the same concept. So if you say change this, you'd rather just do a method. And then this implementation only has access to the internal state to actually change it in the way that you want to. And this is kind of what you see with Redux Toolkit and these solutions, is that they go to a more imperative approach, because it has a lot of orchestration to express it as just a reducer. But the important thing is that you just want to control, I know there's more to Redux than only that, but in terms of controlling changes to state, you need encapsulation of private and public. So you have private state and public methods to change that state, and then the implementation of those methods or actions or whatever you want to call them decides how that state can change. But I'm not dissing on reducers. Redux and reducers brought a whole lot of like good thinking to the front end, and enabled things like, and showed us with that thinking what we can do in terms of dev tools and time travel debugging and all of that stuff. So that's awesome. But there's nothing special about the reducer in itself. It's not the reducer that enables it. It's the thinking or the constraints that a reducer naturally implements for you that enables that stuff. But there are other abstractions that allows you to do the same. Okay. Where were we? What do we want to do? We have this view. So what we can do now is get current. Oh yeah, and let's use so this is a signal of a view where our current view would be dashboard. Yeah, and you can see I have something called like subviews, which is a conversation in itself. I don't think it's like when you implement a router, arguably you don't really need sub routes. But I'm not going to go into that. Let's just go here and yeah, so we don't have view, we have views because you can backtrack. So we'll start with the dashboard view, and then to get the current view, and this is interesting because technically you can like the correct typing for this is really view and then stack, because you will always have an initial view where the current view is views value views value dot length. I wonder if TypeScript understands this, or maybe it just does. Yeah, at least it does return a view regardless. I wonder if this is because I'm curious. Does it become possibly undefined now if I do this? No. Okay, so this isn't strictly true, but let's express this correctly in typing regardless. Like it can be undefined, right? But that's not true for our app. At least we contain this inside this store, so the rest of the application doesn't have to deal with this. Just like, where was it? Our dashboard was currently dealing, like this view, given your TypeScript settings, I wonder why it doesn't show undefined, because it can technically be undefined. Anyways, what we can do with this, we can push, replace, and pop. So let's just do that. Push, replace, and I giggle. I giggle every time the Codium or the AI understands what I want to do. It's like it's a tickle every time it does that. Okay, so what are we going to do now? So signals in impact. Again, a signal in impact is just a state primitive that you can choose to use. You don't have to use it. You can choose to use a MobX observable if that's your game. Or you can use an RxJS observable, you can use XState, it doesn't matter. Impact just ships with some primitives because they're good primitives for managing state. And Impact, even though at its core is just this store composition concept, it is a tool that allows you to build an actual app. So, but the signal, unlike an observable from MobX, doesn't allow mutation. It's like it's not immutable, just like there is no immutability in JavaScript, but it expects you to replace the value of the signal whenever you change it, even though it's an object or an array. So as you know from Redux and other solutions, we would do views.value concat, and I guess this is just view. What did I do? Oh, okay, my typing made it bad. Yeah, okay. Let's just do this. And what I would do here is, if this would show Undefine, I would basically just do this with a comment. At least it's contained in a single place that indeed you always have a view. But like for me, this is what I get obsessed about. Like, why can't I make my code understand that we'll always have a view? Like I understand technically why it can't do that. Or it's difficult to express it at least, but it just makes me think about, okay, how am I writing the code? Is it because how I write my code, or yeah, whatever. And then if we replace, and that's some slicing, so I'm going to copy that. Slicing is very, very difficult. So that's going, we're not going to return it. We're going to say value equals okay, let's just, I wonder, yeah, this is interesting. Oh, you know, I'm going to show you something else. So what I did with these signals is that yeah, this is interesting. Let's do that. Let's do that instead. So instead of replacing the value, which is of course what you would do with strings and booleans and stuff like that, but for arrays and objects, it's not ideal, because you have this nice mutation API in JavaScript. That's very straightforward, but you can't use that if you want to replace the value of the signal. But the amazing thing about setters and getters, which is this value, is that you can have different typing for the getter and the setter. So the setter typing, as you can see here, for the value is that, okay, you can replace it with the type of the value, but you can also give it a function which gives you a draft of the value, and then you can mutate it. So I'm actually using immer under the hood for these signals so that you can do things like draft, push, view. So that means you can use the mutation API of JavaScript, but it still replaces the value of the signal. And I remember this comment from, was it Sebastian Markbåge? I think that's like the Swedish way to pronounce it. He commented on the release of Immer, and he stated that MobX is not like compatible with the mindset and paradigm of React, even though it's extremely efficient at to manage state in React apps with MobX. It's not like matching the mental model, but Immer does, and that's basically because it uses proxies to generate immutable values instead of MobX, which keeps things mutable. So let's see. What do we want to do here? We wanted to did this have like an index or something? Oh, it just replaces the last view. Is that what I'm doing there? Okay. So let's, yeah, so here I could do this, like it's it's pretty cool. Oh, how it so here I should be able to say like draft length -1 equals view. Like I can even do that kind of stuff. And then when we pop, we just say views.value draft. Yeah. Anyways, that's of course optional, but I think it's interesting, like working in a team and Immer. I also remember, like in version 1 of CodeSandbox, we're using Overmind, which has the same concept as MobX. It's, instead of being a proxy around single state values, it's a proxy around a full state tree. And you just do mutations. And I remember when we started that project, or not started that project, but when basically CodeSandbox became a company and we became a bigger team, people were introduced to Overmind and they were really efficient at using it. But that mental shift of like being able to just mutate, and that mutation would still cause reconciliation in React, was like a big mental shift. So a lot of developers would still like make sure that you change the reference of the array, or you would like spread out a new object to change the reference of or you would spread an existing object into a new object to ensure the reference change and all that stuff. And it was so funny to me that we're so used to that that we kind of it's a muscle memory thing. And it's interesting, like the impact that React has had on how we think about making changes to values. I'm not saying necessarily it's wrong or anything, it's just an observation. But my point is, it's difficult to kind of allow both. I could imagine like here you would have some developers who didn't do this and you would other developers who does it. Maybe that's not a problem, but at least it's not like consistent. So it's almost like, yeah, just a reflection. We could force this. So if the value is an object or an array, you would have to write a function. That's interesting. Though it's not obvious why you have to write a function. You would, by like if you didn't know about signals and stuff. But still, you could hover and it will tell you what you would need to do. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But that's another point. Like in API design, I'm thinking now that would be convenient. That would probably help. But it creates a constraint, right? And I might not be right about this. But I'm like really motivated to try it out just because it's cool. But that's something I've learned. Like never reduce flexibility because of a possible opportunity kind of thing. You should be very, very certain when you make those kinds of nice to have changes. Wow, we spent a lot of time on this view stack store. Let's see. But what's nice now is that we can, instead of using this view stack, we can now say view stack, view store, view stack, store. And since, why didn't you pop up? Did I call it view stack store? Oh, I didn't. And we all have all this stuff. We don't need that. We don't need this. Okay, nice. So now we have our view stack store, and now we can rather say what is our current view. Oh, current.name, sorry. And as you can see, I'm not using like any context providers here. So I've been like passing down everything I need into subcomponents, but that's not necessary anymore because now I'm free to use these stores. By the way, you might be concerned that like we're observing access to signals here, and I'm doing this inside a function, but this function is being called in the context of this app, in the context of like executing this function, so it will track that. That's the thing, like when you do this type of observability, just like MobX does, the point is that you don't think about it. Like the only thing you have to think about is, does this component consume signals or observables? If it does, observe it. And then you don't think about where you consume those signals. If you consume it during component render, it will be tracked. If you consume it in an effect or whatever, it won't be tracked unless you use it in the dependency array. But that's like a different mechanism. So we need to, how should we do this? Yeah, so one thing I didn't think about is that okay, we have to make a decision. Do we go and implement each view first, or do we look at the dashboard first? Because the thing is that the dashboard currently uses a lot of data. No, but let's do that. Let's do dashboard content, and then we're just going to remove things here. Wait, did I call it? Oh, view stack store. Wait, let's just do const view stack store current. View. There we go. Okay, so we have a few issues here. Let's just get control of this. Okay, so we are going to render dashboard content. That's fine. So let's go and look at dashboard content. So it doesn't need to dispatch here. We don't need a user either. So this basically just becomes a component like this. And here we can see, so the way I want this dashboard to behave is that each link into the different pages is going to have its own like loading state, so that we're optimistically loading the data for each page, but they don't load because now it waits for all the data to load before it like makes the dashboard interactive. But we're going to see how it looks when just each button is kind of has its own loading state. And oh yeah, but this is interesting because I don't even want that. I want you to be able to, so like when you're on the dashboard, it loads the dashboard, it starts fetching the data in the background, but it doesn't and if so, okay, so as an example, so I open the dashboard, it starts fetching the groceries, but it says that there's no groceries in the list because it hasn't loaded the data yet. But if I go in on the groceries list, it should just go into the existing loading states until it's done before it opens up the groceries list. Yeah, because I don't want you to kind of open the groceries list and then suddenly things pop up. I don't like that. But I do like that it lazily sets up the data when you open the dashboard. I think. Like, this is user experience, and user experience is hard. Yeah. But the point is, we need a way to enable... yeah, okay, so here we have... So I think we can get away with just commenting out a lot of stuff. So we have our shopping cart, menu card here. Yeah, and then that's the only menu card we want. Can I do this? No. But I can do this. Menu card, menu card, menu card, menu card. And then let's not show the calendar thingy at all. Where the hell does that thing? So it's... Wait. Oh, what's this? Did it... Wait, what just happened? Oh, okay. So we have swiper. That's end of swiper. But then we have something else, and I think it should just be this. Yeah, let's try this. And now we're going to use our view stack store, use stack store. And again, I wouldn't have to write it like this. I could just export like a use view stack, for example, from the store file. But again, I want to be really explicit. So this is how it looks. So when we click, oops, view stack store, we can just call push now. And the name of this view is groceries shopping. Cool. And then shop count is going to be 0 for now. Yeah, I don't think we have much time to actually get into the... Let's sign in here with my personal account. Whoa. What did it need now that I haven't made available to it? What is this? Use dinners. Which component? Is in one of your components? Subscription. Like, this is one of the hooks, but I'm not running any of these hooks. Am I? I'm just returning. Oh, sorry. Of course I am. I have to comment out these things. Let's see now. There we go. So now we have our shopping list here. And what we are going to do now, we are going to, if we have time, we have 10 minutes. What we are going to do is yeah, we can just remove it actually. What we are going to do is fire fetching of the data. But before we do that, we need somewhere to start the fetching of the data. And that means we need a store for our groceries. So we can start building that store. I'm not sure if we'll get done with it, but at least it gives us an opportunity to talk about groceries store. And groceries store gives a chance to talk about something we haven't talked about yet, which is queries. So as I said, like, it's really interesting data fetching, because if you think about, there's two different kinds of data fetching. Even using the term data fetching, even the browser having fetch as the name of its like core primitive for making requests is confusing, because, well, at least I think about fetch as go and grab some data I'm going to display. For some reason, that's what I think. But not all requests are that. There are also requests which is like go and change something on the server and give me a response that tells me if this was okay. So that's so the terms queries and mutations better reflect that. But at its core, it's just a request, and the abstraction over that is that it's just a promise. But how you trigger the request and how you consume the response is very different from a query and a mutation. What we're going to do here, we are actually going to query some data, and the way we're going to do it is we want to pre-fetch it, which is like different from a mutation, right? You wouldn't pre-fetch a mutation. And we're going to we could choose to suspend that query instead, but that means we're locking the UI when we're suspending, but it's an opportunity. You wouldn't suspend a mutation. But yeah, so what's nice about one of the primitives in Impact is that you are able to define a query or a mutation, but it only wraps around the promise. It doesn't care about how you do this fetching or make the requests, or if you don't even make a request, maybe it's something else, but it's all about how you consume it. So let's first figure out how the hell do we go and grab these groceries. Yeah, so we have this thing called use collection. Where's that coming from? Oh, use collect. Where are you? Use collection. There we are. So I created, like, Firebase is looks so what's it called? Seemingly simple, but it's super complex when you get into it. So I have this abstraction I call use collection. And if I remember correctly, what this does is that it takes a snapshot and it listens to changes, and then it updates the thing. And I'm generically updating it because, yeah, I'm wondering why I'm doing that. Maybe I could have implemented this. So, and maybe Firebase has I might have, I probably have implemented things in a way that's harder than it needs to be. So for example, here I'm manually updating when it's, yeah, I think this is because of React. So when you get changes to the underlying data in Firebase, it's not immutable, I think. So you will get the same list, I think. I might be wrong about that. I do wonder, why do I have like modified? Why do I have these explicit type changes? Isn't there like a snapshot doc changes? What the hell is doc changes? Since the last snapshot. Yeah, because you get a new snapshot. And then, oh yeah, sorry. So, but is there like a snapshot? Instead of changes, you just get docs. Right? Like, why do I do doc changes? Does this take anything? Oh, it's just docs. Why do I do this added and modified? And seems weird. I do have this doc change doc data server timestamps estimate. To milliseconds. Yeah, I'm just reflecting on, do I really need to do this? Or could I, maybe we can just try re-implementing it and then see if I really need to do this. One thing that's important though is that we have this thing called get family doc ref. What the hell is that? Yeah, that's basically a utility. So this is how Firebase works. It's like, okay, I have a user and that user has a family ID. And then I need to get access to like the data of that user, I need to use the family ID as like, that's the data for all the family. And then I have like a specific, and some data is on the family and some data is on the user. So I need to get these doc references, but these are really just utilities. So on snapshot, where is that coming from? Oh, interesting. Okay, so so the way this works now, I use a collection, I give it name groceries, for example. And then I go and listen to a snapshot of that. And do I have like an initial value for this? Or does on snapshot give me an initial value? The listener can be cancelled, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, interesting. Where is use groceries? So I'm using collection. How do I groceries cache? Oh, use, sorry, where's use groceries? Oh, I'm just using a collection. How does it, where does it get the initial data from? Because this returns oh, I actually don't think how does this on snapshot work? Attach a listener for, yeah, so what I think the way this works is that you actually don't have anything, but when you call on snapshot, you will get the initial data, but I think you get it asynchronously. Which is like the whole thing about Firebase. It's like everything's async and really hard to work with sometimes. But it doesn't, oh my god, it doesn't say anything about, I'm very confident that it gives you, like it triggers once by just subscribing to it, which is kind of annoying. because if you grab the data first, which makes sense, but then you don't, but then you also get like an event for just subscribing to it. Oh, we're out of time. Yeah, I need to, like, I want to do this right now. Like, it's so annoying. It's not really about, this is not a Firebase stream, but it's really confusing sometimes how you deal with Firebase. So we're kind of doomed to get into some of it. But if I can remember correctly, I think the idea is that you're just going to use this on snapshot, and then you will get the initial value, and you subscribe to that. And this works really well with Angular, right? Because you can just give it a stream, an observable, and then you can just use this async pipe thing to consume the value. But you don't you don't have it yet. It's async. So it's this weird mix of, you do want a promise initially to get the initial data, but from there you want to subscribe to it. And the way like RxJS and Firebase does it is that, no, you're just going to subscribe to it. And then you'll asynchronously get the first value at some point. But you need to track the state of that. Like you want like you either you want an initial value, or you want to track the state of pending, like when do I get the first value. And you can't do that with a subscription. You need to do that with a promise. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I watched some Angular clips, and like there you have signals and you have observables, like RxJS observables. And then you can create a signal from an observable. So if an observable is like go to fetch some data, you can make that into a signal, but then you have to give it an initial value. You cannot wait for that RxJS observable to resolve its first value and kind of wait for that. Which is really interesting. Which again makes me think, like, how do we write code? Shouldn't you do that? Shouldn't you be able to wait for an initial value? Or should you always write your code as, okay, this is the default value, and then whenever the new value comes, it comes. But that makes sense for an array, like a list of things. But it certainly doesn't make sense for example, we use git status. You don't want a default value for a git status. You need the first value of the git status before you can subscribe to updates for it. Or at least you have to wait for it before you can display anything. It's really interesting. And you can't like express that with Firebase for some reason. But I do think they also have like a get collection kind of thing. So we can use that, and then we use onSnapshot to subscribe to changes to that collection. But then then I think when you subscribe with onSnapshot, you will also get the initial value, which is really annoying. Or, oh yeah, remember now. But then you can say only subscribe to documents that has modified after the current time. So you will only get updates from the future, but that's like a config to the subscription. Like it's, yeah. Anyways, we'll stop now. I'm going to prepare a strategy for just doing normal promise-based data fetching and subscribing on top of that, because that's what we care about. And then we're going to see how we'll implement that in Impact. I guess that's next week, Tuesday. So thanks for following along. And yeah, we didn't review our changes here. I forgot to do that. But generally, I like how you kind of see how it cleans up some things already. But we're not comparing this to like a global state store concept. We're comparing this to like really passing props. So you could say that's a little bit unfair when comparing it to global state stores. But we're not saying that passing props or global state stores is wrong. It's just that there is this solution in between the two that I haven't seen much of, really. It's basically context providers in React, but I haven't seen other state management concepts embracing this scoped state concept. Anyways, we'll talk later. Bye for now.